We wake up every day and we face growth, and it's up to us individually on how we react and how we execute to that growth. What's up, everybody? I'm Austin, and welcome to the Growth Encounter, where we talk to ordinary people living extraordinary lives in their faith, their family, their community, and businesses. Let's get it. What's up, everybody? My name's Austin Montgomery, and welcome to the Growth Encounter. Today, I got a good friend of mine that we've been acquaintances for several years on social media, and we finally get to meet in person, but we've always had good conversations back and forth over social media, and I'm glad he's got to be here in person, Mr. TJ. TJ, if you don't mind, will you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure, yeah, my name's TJ Ware. I'm the founder and owner of Paradise Claims. I'm also the founder and CEO at NTS.
Yeah.
Name that shingle, which has become a pretty popular thing in the roofing industry. I'm pretty well known for having a beautiful wife and 10 kids, which is kind of crazy.
10 kids.
Yeah, but life's an adventure, and so far we're enjoying it.
Nice. Now, where are you from?
From Fort Worth originally.
You born in Fort Worth?
Mm-hmm.
Man, I was too. Small world. So what part of Fort Worth? Because everybody says Fort Worth, but then there's all the little towns.
I grew up on the west side, so went to school in White Settlement.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
So my mom lives in River Oaks.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So yeah.
I'm joking.
No.
I'm up in Keller now.
Yeah.
River Oaks is all right.
Yeah.
I still go out to the military base over there sometimes.
What was that? Not Lackland, or
it used to be called Carswell.
Carswell.
But it's the Naval Air Station in Fort Worth now.
Yeah.
That's what it's called.
Yeah. So I lived up in River Oaks for some time with my mom, but I grew up in Crowley.
Okay.
So I was born in Fort Worth, obviously, but then I grew up in Crowley, so the south side of Fort Worth. And so, that's pretty cool. So, born in Fort Worth, tell us a little bit about your history of your life growing up. What was that like? What did you start out doing? What did you do in school? Did you play sports?
Okay, so I had a pretty interesting life.
Yeah.
Exposed to a lot of cool stuff when I was young because my dad moved buildings and heavy structures.
Yeah.
And he even moved some of the historical structures for the city of Grapevine, the turntable for the Tarantula train, the train depot.
Yeah.
And I got to take part in a lot of that with heavy equipment and everything when I was young, which I know you'll appreciate.
Yeah.
I'm always seeing you posting pictures of equipment.
Yeah.
So that was really cool, but my dad, unfortunately, he fell into some drug addiction and substance abuse, and my life kind of fell apart by the time I was in middle school. I was a smart kid, so I skipped the 6th grade and went into 7th grade. Mm-hmm. And he wanted me to be a football star, but it's hard, when you're younger than the other kids. And then the first day of the first practice, they handed me the ball, and I was running through the ropes, doing the drill, and I fell and broke my arm.
Yeah.
And so I set out football in 7th grade. My life was kind of rough. I started falling in with a bad crowd, by 8th grade. And then I realized that, I got bullied a little bit in middle school, which I had never experienced.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was younger and some of these kids had been held back, and I used big words, they started bullying me. So one day I did something stupid, and I realized all the other kids were laughing with me, not at me.
Yeah.
And it was like a light bulb went off in my head, and I was like, I'm going to be the biggest jackass this school has ever seen.
Yeah.
And by the time I was 15, I was living on the streets.
Yeah.
Full time. Honestly, selling drugs and guns and stuff.
Was that by choice? Or
it was just both my parents had substance abuse problems at the time.
Yeah.
And so life at home was unmanageable. I actually took off and hitchhiked downtown and hopped a bus to Austin. And, just did that for a while, and then I lived on the streets in Fort Worth, kind of doing the whole hoodlum thing.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting this really good job at the U.S. Attorney's Office, which was really interesting. So I was working for the Justice Department right before I turned 17. And a strange thing had happened. My mom actually got cancer when I was 15, and so everything at home just completely fell apart. But I had gone to a private school once in 5th grade, and my mom talked to that lady, and she said that if I would find a way to go out there to get there every day, that she would get me out of high school. So I actually ended up graduating high school at 16.
Really?
Started working full time.
Yeah.
Going to school. I applied for college, but my parents hadn't done their tax returns in over 2 years, so I couldn't get FAFSA, student aid, Pell Grant, nothing.
Yeah.
So I was working full time at 16. My sister co-signed a bank account for me.
Yeah.
And I was writing checks for tuition, and all my friends were getting popped for drugs and all this stuff, and I knew it wasn't going to last. I knew I was going to end up in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And 9/11 happened, and it was a big deal because I worked for the Justice Department.
So I want to back up just a few steps.
Yeah.
Because I feel like you talked about a few things that were pretty pivotal in your life, and I want to clarify on some of those things. Is around age 15, you said you're basically on the streets, right?
Yeah.
And then you started looking to go into, was it college, or you got tuition, or you were paying checks for tuition, right?
So the condition, I had gone to this private school in 5th grade.
Yeah.
And it was for gifted kids. And
Yeah.
because of that, I was able to skip the 6th grade.
Yeah.
Well, she told my mom that if I would, get a ride out there every day, that she would get me through high school.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was December of 2000. I just turned 16. She said, "You're ready to graduate on one condition. You've got to enroll in college."
Yeah.
And that was the only way she would let me graduate.
So what made that, what turned that point in your head to say, hey, I'm going to do this? And because, I mean, that at that point, you're on the streets and you're doing things probably you shouldn't have been doing. And what clicked in your head to say, hey, I need to get back on track and do this?
So I always hung out with a pretty rough crowd since I was in about 7th or 8th grade. But I didn't talk like them. I didn't dress like them. They would make fun of me because I still dressed nicely.
Yeah.
But I wanted to get somewhere in life.
Yeah.
I never saw white settlement as being the place that I would end up.
Right.
And I wanted to accomplish things and achieve a lot more. And I didn't know how to do it, but I knew that it wasn't going to happen where I was.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. So 9/11 happens, and what happens then?
Well, I remember I was in my office on the 17th floor of Burnett Plaza, a 40-story building in downtown Fort Worth, and we watched the second plane hit. Mm-hmm. And we had people in the office on the phone with people in the Pentagon, the DCIS and NCIS that we worked with. And it was pretty crazy. I had all this terrorism training, and I was opening the mail, and there was the anthrax scare and all of this wild stuff. And one of the security guards of the Federal Protective Service there was a retired Marine, and he would ask me every day, "When are you going to join? When are you going to join?" And I had never thought about going to the military.
Yeah.
But I realized, actually, a bunch of my friends, we were hanging out one day, and I think it was on a weekend, and they were messing around, like huffing some stuff.
Yeah.
And I wasn't into huffing because I had read that kills your
Yeah.
kills your brain cells.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to be dumb.
Right.
So I was like, man, y'all are whack. I'm out of here. And they all left, and they ended up getting in a fight with a guy and carjacking him. They all go to jail. These are like my close friends.
Right.
And I was looking around, and like everybody in my life was just falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked down to the recruiter's office on my lunch break, and I joined up. But I was only 17, so they had to track my parents down and get them to sign the paperwork.
Which branch?
Marine Corps.
Nice. So 9/11 happens, and obviously those of us that remember that time know that it was a crazy time in the country. I was at the time in 6th grade, and I think I was in like reading class. So I was pretty young, but I still remember it all because we were watching it on TV. And so you join the Marine Corps. What happens from there? Because I mean that's a big choice to make, to go from your office from the job you had to going into the Marine Corps. I mean that's a big life decision to make that commitment. What'd you do from there, and what kind of impact did that make on your life?
Well, it definitely changed everything about my life. And so I shipped off to basic training in the... Actually, I went into the delayed entry program.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're like waiting for a slot at boot camp.
Yeah.
And I'd gotten a job as an air traffic controller. And when I went down there to sign the paperwork, they realized I was a drug waiver because I had gotten popped when I was 15.
Yeah.
And they had these diversionary court programs where it could have like been deferred, but my dad was like, "No, man, give him a conviction."
Yeah.
Which, That's kind of interesting now that I have kids. Like, I don't really want them to have that kind of stuff.
Right.
But I did have that, so they took that job away from me, and they gave me a job in aviation supply, which was at least still around airplanes because I've always loved aircraft.
Yeah.
And I went down there to ship off, and I found out I had mono. I got sick like right when they took me down to the MEPS to get on the bus to go to boot camp.
Yeah.
And so I went to the doctor and I had mono, and I had to rest up for a couple of months
Yeah.
and recover. And my grandma took care of me for that time period for like 6 or 8 weeks. But, I was still running around with these hoodlum friends. And my mom had signed the paperwork, but she was really upset and nervous because like the wars were starting and everything.
Yeah.
We weren't in Iraq yet, but they were talking about Iraq
Right.
already at this point. This is summer of 2002. And my friend and I went down to Mexico and were smuggling a bunch of stuff back across the border, and he got popped.
Yeah.
And we end up making it back. We get him bonded out within like 8 hours or something. Yeah. And when I get back to Fort Worth, I look at my phone, and there were like all these missed calls. And I called my mom back, and she's like, people are calling me. You're in jail in Mexico. What the hell is going on? Like, it's time for you to go to the Marines.
Yeah. Hey, you need to go now.
Yeah.
Man, that's a crazy story. That's almost like I feel like it's could be made into a movie probably.
Man, my life has honestly, it's been really interesting, and I've got a lot of those. And
Yeah.
a lot of them are because of stupid decisions that I've made, but by the grace of God, I'm still here.
Yeah. It's funny you say stupid decisions. I feel like all of us make stupid decisions every day, right? And still, even as an adult, I still make stupid decisions. But one thing that I've learned is that you've got to be able to fail forward, and learn from those failures, and try not to duplicate that, right? So you went off to the Marines. How long were you in the Marines for?
So I went off in 2002. My family came out there and watched me graduate in October of 2002, graduate boot camp, and it was like one of the best days of my life.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was amazing. And
would you say that would be like your first big accomplishment?
Maybe so.
Major?
I felt like my dad was proud of me that day.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's cool.
That was huge for me. And so I signed up for the reserves, and I did a few months in the reserves.
Yeah.
I mean, after boot camp, I went to combat training. I went to MOS school in Mississippi, and it was like the next March of 2003, I went to my reserve unit in Fort Worth and only drilled for a couple of months before we got activated because they were sending us to Iraq.
Yeah.
But in March of 2003, I came home, and I went over to Hooters in Southwest Fort Worth, and I got to chatting with my waitress, and that was Jackie. She was a Weatherford cheerleader, and she was working at Hooters serving tables.
Nice.
And so that's how we originally met and started dating.
So y'all met at Hooters.
Yep.
Man, good old Hooters.
In March of 2003, so a little over 20 years ago.
Wow. So how long have y'all been married?
Over 19.
19 years.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive off into that. You had a pretty rough childhood, teenagehood, and then you went off to the Marines and, got pretty disciplined after that, right, I would say. And how was, you met Jackie from there? What happened there?
Well, honestly, we didn't know really what we were doing. Both of us had come from kind of difficult backgrounds. We didn't have a lot of good examples for married people. And we found out we were pregnant with my oldest, Asher.
Yeah.
And my grandfather was on his deathbed, and he said, "Son, I want to bless that boy." And we went over there, and he touched on her belly and said, "I want to bless this baby." But he said, "Promise me you're going to marry that girl."
Yeah.
And right after that, I found out I was going to Iraq, so my family threw together an amazing wedding.
Yeah.
I got married on January 10th of 2004, and I went to Iraq on February 6th.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
So that's, the last person I had on the show was, he's a professional angler, and he had a major tournament a week after his son was born. And you're kind of telling the same story that you had. Your wife's pregnant, and you're getting ready to ship off, right? Now, did you ship off before or after?
Yeah, I shipped off. I shipped off. I made it home before the baby was born.
Yeah.
But I took off February 6th. We headed out and flew over there, flew to Germany and then Kuwait and then up to Iraq. We were in Western Iraq, and this was back when like the Battle of Fallujah was cranking up.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a big rocket attack on March 18th.
Yeah.
And one of our guys got killed, and my roommate got blown up pretty bad. And I ended up getting sent back home after that in the end of May, and ended up getting medically retired later. And it's kind of a long, terrible story, but honestly, I spent a lot of my 20s like putting myself back together.
Yeah.
And I went through some really, really tough times.
Physically and mentally?
Mentally, PTSD, traumatic brain injury, and I had a lot of trouble adjusting once I came home.
Yeah. Now, that in itself is a whole like growth moment in your life, right? Experiencing that, being through that situation. But how did that affect you having to leave your wife who's pregnant? And how did you cope with that? Or did you?
Back then they had pay phones. We could buy phone cards, and they had AOL internet chat rooms.
Yeah.
So I would work a 12-hour shift. Sometimes it'd be 13 or 14 hours because there's some overlap. And then I would walk a couple miles like on this giant base, like through the sand to the internet tent, and then I would chat with her for like an hour or so and try to get a little bit of sleep before my next shift. We work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So it was really tough, but we tried to stay connected. She was pretty close to my family and my sister while I was gone, so that was good. She had somewhat of a support system, but she ran into some problems with the pregnancy, and that was pretty stressful.
Yeah.
That was really tough to handle and deal with from there. And then after March 18th, because there was no combat before then, and that was the first day that we ran into combat, was March 18th of 2004. And that day we were on the receiving end of a whole bunch of rockets and mortars, and we lost some people. And after that, there was this interesting thing that happened in these wars, Austin, and it was that because of the internet, people were dying, and then maybe somebody would call or email their wife and say, hey, man, John got killed today, and the wife would go call John's wife and be like, I'm so sorry, I just heard about John, and she hasn't been notified yet.
Uh-huh.
So because of that, anytime anybody died, they would master switch, shut off all communication off of our forward operating base.
Yeah.
And so if I didn't call home one day, my wife knew someone was dead, but she didn't know who it was.
Yeah. She didn't know if she was going to get that call or not. Yeah. Man, that's rough. I feel like we could unpack a whole story and podcast just over that segment of your life, but I want to try to dive deeper into what you said. In your 20s growing up, or going through your 20s, it was a rough time. And you got married at what age?
I was 19.
19. So for a 10-year period, you had it was pretty rough, right?
Yeah.
So, but you're married, you got your first kid, and I know you said you got 10. How did that fall in line there?
So it was pretty interesting. We had our son, Asher, shortly after I got back from Iraq. And that was an incredible experience. It was a lot to go through because I was having trouble adjusting back, and I couldn't sleep or anything for a long time. I mean, I barely slept for years. The VA had me on trazodone and different tranquilizers just so that I could sleep at night, after coming out of combat and stuff. And we had our second son in 2005, and I officially got out of the Marine Corps the 15th of November 2005, and my second son was born a few weeks later. And then I got strung out on meth really bad for about a year and a half. And part of that was me trying to reconnect with my dad, who was still, unfortunately, a drug user. and looking for some sort of way to deal with the things I had been
Coping.
through. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Jackie stuck with me for a while, but like I knew that before long, it wasn't going to last, and I was just falling apart. And so one day I hit my rock bottom, and it was November of 2006. And I've known people that never had a rock bottom.
Yeah.
But I did, and I hit my rock bottom, and I said, this ain't the life I want.
Yeah.
And so I quit cold turkey in November of 06.
Just done.
Done. Went home and slept for a few weeks.
Yeah.
And my wife and my mom, like everybody that came and knocked on the door, they said, go away.
Yeah.
And I put on about 100 pounds in 4 months.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I started like slowly putting my life back together,
Yeah.
as I approached my mid-20s. And it was challenging, but Jackie was amazing. And we had our third boy after that, Ethan. And then we had after I had cleaned up, and we moved to other part of town, and I started a fencing company in Fort Worth.
Mm-hmm.
And ran it and grew it. Like during the first year, grew it quite a bit, and decided we wanted to get away from Fort Worth.
Yeah.
So I put the business up for sale on Craigslist and sold the whole company, truck, trailers, tools, contracts, everything, and moved down to Pensacola, Florida, and that's where we had our oldest daughter.
Man, that's a big life change right there. That's several thousand miles away, isn't it? Right?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's like, I think it's maybe 600 miles. It's about an 11-hour drive.
Yeah.
And the water was beautiful, and it was affordable. And we moved down there, and I started another company called Pensacola Pet Doors.
Yeah.
And we did pet doors, door installation, pet services, dog houses, all this stuff. And it was going okay. Like, we had commercials on local cable.
Mm-hmm.
But that was late 2008.
Yep.
And the recession had already hit.
Yeah.
Now, I was doing construction in Dallas-Fort Worth, and I didn't even feel the recession.
Right.
But I went to Florida, and I learned, about how the economy is different in different places.
Yeah.
Now, Jackie, after we had our daughter down there, she ran into some postpartum depression she had never dealt with before.
Yeah.
And so a few months after my daughter was born, she said, I'm packing up the house, and I'm going back to Texas with or without you.
Yeah.
So I sold my little boat. I sold my four-wheeler. We packed up a Penske truck and came back to Texas. And after that, I started going back to school. I used the GI Bill to go back to school.
Okay. Man, so, golly, you do have a string of stories in your life of just moments that can have tremendous growth, and I feel like each one was probably a stepping stone to who you are today, right?
Definitely. Well, and so I come back, and I liked photography, so I enrolled in photography school.
Okay.
Ended up doing really well at photography school, helping some big-name photographers around here, and then we started a photography studio and a business, and I started doing product photography because I couldn't spank other people's kids and make them stand still. So we started doing product, and we kind of got that beach bug again.
Yeah.
So I took every penny that I had, which wasn't much.
Yeah.
We had never had any money. I'd never known anybody with any money at this point in my life at all.
Right.
And we took every penny we had and we invested it in a photography business doing beach photography in Orange Beach, Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
And we moved down there. I paid a company to build a website, do all of this marketing. I had flyers in all of the beachfront condos. And then I made a deal with a big wedding planner down there to shoot a bunch of her weddings. And I had them all booked. We moved into a cute little house down there, and it was pretty awesome. And Memorial Day weekend, Deepwater Horizon exploded.
Mm.
And the oil washed ashore, and one of the fishing boat captains walked on his boat and killed himself.
Really?
People were distraught. They said the beach would be destroyed for 20 years.
Wow.
And I tried to file a claim with BP, and they said they wanted 2 years of tax returns. And this was the first year we'd ever done it. And so we left. We went back to Texas, and I enrolled in Laterno University in East Texas for professional aviation. But 2 businesses in a row, 2 hard lessons.
Yeah.
And despite working my butt off, The first one, going to Florida, I should have known that the economy wasn't as good there, and there were some personal factors.
Yep.
The beach photography business was executed perfectly,
Yeah.
and it was one of those outliers. A disaster caught us and ruined the entire tourism season down there. So, I've had some successes in business now, but and people know about my successes. They don't know about all these failures.
Yeah, yeah. They typically, I mean, that's the common theme in business or anybody that's of any success. Not necessarily just business, but they don't see the struggle coming up.
Sure.
Right, and they may look at your life now and be like, man, he had a silver spoon in his mouth, but they don't know nothing about you, right? Same thing with me, and I'd say 99% of the people out there. But I feel like you hit some walls that made you realize your priorities in life, probably. Would you agree with that?
I think so. Yeah, probably multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times. So you move back to Texas after the photography business, and you go to aviation school. What happens after that?
Well, that was a huge growth phase for me, professionally, spiritually. The VA still had me on all these different psych meds, which was good and bad.
Yeah.
But in order to fly and get my medical certificate, I had to get off of those. So I took like 9 months and weaned myself off of the majority of the different medications I was on. I started getting in a little bit better physical shape. And then school was very challenging, and it really just stimulated my mind.
I want to step back real quick because a lot of people, are on depressants and different things like that. And I feel like eventually they get dependent on those, right? As it's just a natural thing to take it because the doctors tell us to, right? What'd you do to wean yourself off of that? Was it physical? Did you start working out? Did you start eating healthier? What'd you do?
It was a few things. I think that, some people need some of those things.
Right.
They have
Absolutely.
a chemical imbalance. Yeah. But if you're going to come off of something like that's helping maintain your stability, like you've probably got to look towards some behavior modifications and some different ways to make sure that you stay in whatever that safe zone is for you. Yeah. Even now, I've learned this several times, in difficult ways through business. I can only take so much stress.
Right.
When my stress threshold is just gone, I'm no good to anybody or myself. So I've got to make sure to protect my environment. And I think people that are maybe trying to transition off of those types of medications have to be very careful. They say to do one at a time, because you don't know, changing things makes you act crazy or whatever, and do it slowly. And so fortunately I was able to do that and feel pretty healthy, but I was challenged and engaged by a new thing. Mm-hmm. And so that really helped me focus on, keeping my shit together.
Yeah. That was 9 months of having to take a lot of self-reflection and self-realization of who you really are and what you need to do and everything like that. So you got off of what you needed to get off so you could pass your exam. Did you go through with that?
Yeah, I did that. I got did all my ground school for a semester, and then another semester I started flying, and I got my private pilot's license there, and then got the beach bug a little bit.
Yeah.
And I found out that since I had spent 1 year of my GI Bill in photography school, I was going to end up with like $40,000 in student loans at LeTourneau. So I decided to change my path just a little bit, and I was going to switch into helicopters, and I transferred down to Palm Beach State University in West Palm Beach.
Nice.
And Jackie's like ultimately adaptable, like she's down for whatever. So we hopped in a truck and drove across the country and moved to West Palm Beach, and my little kids are climbing, palm trees, cutting down coconuts, and I got there and I met this guy at church, and he said, if you'll get your instrument rating, you can start flying with our missionary organization instead of going ahead and getting your rotorcraft and helicopters. So I enrolled in instrument, and because I was on the GI Bill, I got down there and they handed me the keys to an airplane, and they said you need 40 hours of cross-country flight. So I'm flying to Clearwater, I'm flying to Jupiter, I'm flying down to the Keys and back, 3 times a week, and really enjoying life, enjoying my family, and learning and growing in a beautiful environment. So it was a really good time in life for me. Like, I didn't have any money, but who cares? I look back now and it's the times in my life where I had the least amount of money. Honestly, I was the happiest.
Yeah.
And so, I wish sometimes I could return to the way that felt.
Yeah.
Although I'm probably spoiled by things now.
Right. Yeah.
So we did that for 6 months, and then I was going to transfer into helicopters out in Arizona at Yavapai College. And Jackie was like, we're just tired of moving for a while. Can we go back to Texas? So we went back to Texas, and a couple years earlier, I had worked for like 4 or 5 days with my father-in-law, and he was an electrical contractor.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about electricity, but I knew that he got paid $100 an hour, and I got paid $10 an hour for like the 4 days I worked with him.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I want to make the $100 an hour. So I do some research, and I started an electrical contracting company in East Texas. I hired a master electrician, I hired a journeyman, and I would work all day and learn from them. And I would read forums all night and try to become the best electrician I could be. And so I had an electrical contracting company. Within about 6 months, we moved back to Fort Worth, which is a bigger market. And then my wife and I grew All Pro Electric and All Pro Roofing and Construction starting in like 2012.
Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the people in the industry first knew me from, because I was a roofing company owner in Dallas, Fort Worth, and started networking, with all the other roofing company owners.
Right. So I know Facebook and social media was really kind of kicking off in the 2007, 8. In high school, I didn't even have a Facebook until I graduated, which was like, I graduated 2008, and so I started having social media like 2009 or something like that. But in 2012, and I can't really remember a lot in 2012 as far as social media, but was it real big then for the roofing industry?
No, it wasn't. Media? It was not. And social media didn't get big for roofing until like at least like 2016.
Yeah.
And
that's about when I remember it.
So I got on social media. I got on Facebook like about 2009 when I started flying. I had rejected it for a while, but then I was flying and I was like, man, I'm doing something with my life. Like, I want all my hood friends to see it. So I got on Facebook and started connecting with people and family and stuff.
Yeah. And
didn't do much with it until I got a cold call from April Hall. You know who she is? She does the SRC Summit. She was April Crowell back then. And she cold called my office and said, hey, we do an O&P summit. And we had heard of O&P.
Yeah.
We were like, we had done a roof, and it was a rental home, but the guy inside it was a roofing salesman, and he was telling my friend and I that worked with me about overhead and profit and all this stuff. So we were fascinated, but we didn't know how to get it.
Yeah.
So she offered us some paid training. I had never paid for any training. This was like 2016, 2017. My wife and I, we go and we pay, and Steve Patrick's there, and he says, hey, I got this Facebook group, Love the Playing Field. And I joined that Facebook group, and that was the first time. See, before that, I had been reading a little bit on forums.
Yeah.
Because that's, forums
that's
were there.
what you did.
And so once I got into Level the Playing Field, man, my eyes just lit up, and I started learning, and I learned about SVG, and I started eventually going to some roofer meetups.
Yeah.
But I barely used social media. A little bit like 17, 18, a little bit in 19. And see, I sold All Pro in the summer of 18. I had started Paradise in the beginning of 18. But I didn't actually start pushing on social media until the very end of 2019.
Yeah.
Is when I first started pushing like I do now. And I did, in 2018, Paradise did pretty good. It did like $4.5 million in claims.
Yeah.
2019, we did like $7.5 million in claims. I probably worked 5 months that year.
Yeah.
Wonderful year. 2020, we grew 12x.
Wow.
So we did over $100 million in 2020. It was from Facebook.
Yeah.
And, it's been amazing and horrible at the same time.
Right.
If any one thing has been the most difficult evolution in my life, it's 2020, Hurricane Laura, and us growing our sales by 12x in 1 year.
Yeah.
And it almost killed me.
Yeah. Just the stress piece of it.
The stress.
Now, you said you had your fencing or your electrical and roofing contracting business. How was that? Were y'all running that together?
Yeah.
So did y'all have a staff of people that worked for you? I mean,
up to about 24 at one point. We're a W-2 company.
Wow, no kidding.
Yeah, we had an office in Keller. We had an office in College Station. We had an office in McKinney.
Yeah.
And then we had a little kind of office out in Mount Pleasant. It was kind of the storm office.
Not a lot of people do W-2s nowadays with the roofing contract business.
More now, less so back then, especially. But it's the way it's going.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different reasons why.
Yeah.
And I kind of saw that on the horizon. And I also wanted to be able to provide people like benefits and health insurance and all that stuff. But it was really hard.
Yeah. We operate the same way, and we operate as we don't want part-time salespeople. We want somebody to make a career out of this, right? And so you made the decision. Like, was that a hard decision to sell your company, or
it wasn't? No, I hated it.
Really?
I mean, there were parts of it that I liked, but later, after Lake Charles and everything, I learned why some things were difficult before. And so Jackie ran the office and all of that at All Pro, and Jackie's not an ops person. And so it was my fault. I put her in that role because I just made this stupid assumption. She's my wife, so she's supposed to be like my office manager or my admin assistant or whatever, right? Like just because she's a woman, she's
the narrative.
She's going to have like these certain attributes and skills to her personality, which was completely wrong. She's a visionary like me. She's very strategic. She's not one that gets things done and stays on top of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was just always kind of challenging and stressful. I had a couple of good office people.
Did that make it challenging in y'all's marriage as well?
It did
outside of business, but two visionaries together.
Yeah, and so we do all of this coaching now because, she's about to get her EOS implementer certification. She's a Gallup Strength Finder coach. We do the Culture Index personality assessments, and we consult for a lot of companies now because now we've done this company after company. And I built NTS on EOS and using all of these assessments because I learned 2020, 2021, I learned so much. I learned where I had gone wrong. And then people look at us and they go, both of you guys being all gas, no break, no details, 10 kids, how do you keep them all alive?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, there was 14, but we can't find the right. No, that's a joke. But so there's a lot of those challenges. So I've learned that I have to find those real strong integrator types in order to be successful. And that was just something I missed. I didn't understand that. I didn't come from a big corporate background where you were taught these things. And I didn't go to business school. I went to photography school and I went to aviation school. So I just didn't know these things. Once I learned them, my life changed.
Yeah.
And it's totally different now.
Yeah.
And it's so much better.
Well, now, when you say learning how they work, not so much you implementing it, but finding the people that are that integrator person.
So very first, it's the understanding of different personalities and how it takes all the different people to make a company successful.
Absolutely.
Any organization.
Yeah.
And I used to hire people, and I think that they would remind me of me, and so I would hire them because I saw something that was like me. And that's not usually the best way to hire because I need to hire for my weaknesses.
Right.
I have my strengths and they go pretty far, but I need those people that can help in the areas that I'm weak in. So the realization about that, and then some tools for figuring that out, which for us was Culture Index.
Yeah.
And it breaks up, there's 19 different Culture Index personality profiles broken up in 4 categories: visionary, social, technical, and organizational. And learning that was very life-changing. And I learned I'm this extreme visionary. I'm what's called a trailblazer.
Yeah.
I'm very forward-thinking, very social, very fast-paced, big picture thinker. I'm not a details guy.
Right.
And Jackie's similar. Jackie's what's called a philosopher. And what's funny is John Cenak's also a philosopher. Matt Mulholland, Justin Reichel, Sam Struthers, these very forward-thinking people that are strategic and but all of those people, they need integrators, they need detail people.
Right.
So I never had an integrator, and that created a lot of problems during 2020 when we grew so much, because on a small scale, Jackie's smart enough to figure out how to handle everything.
Right.
On this huge, massive scale where we're having these terrible cash flow challenges and everything with a hurricane, everything just became unmanageable.
Yeah.
And my entire team was built out wrong, and probably some of the people that I had that were really good, I didn't understand their strengths.
Right.
And then some people, I had them in the wrong roles, and I have to ultimately take responsibility for all of that because I'm the CEO, I'm the company owner, and I've learned to take that responsibility and take action to put the right people in the right places now.
Was that internally hard for you to accept? Like knowing that, like, hey, I can't take on everything, because
It would have been if I wasn't so desperate.
Right.
I was so desperate for help that when somebody threw me a bone and said, "Hey, I have some stuff that might help you," and I
Yeah.
realized the value, I didn't care about those feelings because it was like a light at the end of the tunnel for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's for a lot of business owners that are visionaries, or especially male-dominated industries, men that have never been, they either were blue collar and started their own business, whatever it may be, didn't go to business school or anything like that. I didn't go to business school. That pride piece takes over a lot of times.
Yes.
Right. And I used to be a prideful person, and I've had to learn to let go of that. And so it's similar. My wife and I now, we are total opposites. I'm very visionary. She's an integrator person. And so it worked very well for us being able to mash together. But I knew that when we started our company, like, I didn't want to hire me, because if we're hiring me, we're gonna be a mess, right? And so luckily I had that train of thought before we started our company.
Yeah.
And I realized that early in my career, and I was like, I may want a few of me, but I better have like double of me, so we can keep up with the rest of it, right?
Right.
And so I think a lot of people just don't understand that and won't accept it because of pride.
And you don't know what you don't know, right? But you're right. People are very prideful, and I've seen a lot of people go through that hardship because of that. And if you act like you've got it all figured out, then the people around you won't stop and try to help you.
Right.
But fortunately, the very end of 2020, I got introduced to this stuff. All of 21 and 22, I'm just on a learning mission, learning everything I can about EOS, about visionary integrator combinations. I'm reading Rocket Fuel and Traction and all of these business books. And we created NTS in the beginning of 21. It started coming together, and then we started collecting revenue like in November of 21. And this is the first company I've ever created and founded after learning all these things.
Yeah.
And it's a very different experience than any other company I've run in the past.
Really? So now you're still running Paradise and NTS? You still have both of them going?
Yep.
Nice. Okay, so tell us just a quick synopsis of what NTS is and what Paradise Claims is.
So for lack of a better word, ITEL is our only major competitor at NTS.
Okay.
And we are an identification service for roofing products. So
Okay.
we serve roofers, insurance adjusters, and they send us in a shingle. We tell them if that product's still available or not. We tell them if it's compatible with products currently on the market or not. So sometimes a roofer will have some blown off shingles. They can't find it. They send it into NTS. We send them a report saying it's no longer available. They send that to the insurance company, and they get the whole roof replaced instead. Right. So that's kind of practically how it works. And then public adjuster, Paradise Claims is a public adjusting firm, and we work on commercial claims nationwide. So we work for property owners, and we represent them and negotiate a settlement with their insurance company so they can afford to fix their property.
Gotcha. And so you've had both of these up and running up into this time, and so I want to dive off into now, towards the end of this segment, is like, you've got your kids. Now, you just had one?
Yeah, I have one that's not two yet.
Not two yet. Okay. So up until 2 years ago, you've had 9 kids, right?
Yeah.
Between all these businesses, like, you've got monumental growth. You got business everywhere. Besides the books you read, besides the trainings you went to, was there anything internally that you had to switch a gear that you can think of that helped you grow through that?
I'm sure there's a lot of different things. Like Lake Charles in 2020 was so difficult to us in business. Like Jackie and I worked 16 hours a day, 7 days a week for 5 months straight. And you can't do that and not neglect your children.
Right.
And so I am still trying to make up to my kids for neglecting them for that period of time in Lake Charles. And they're traumatized by it. The next time we talked about chasing a hurricane, they were freaked out.
Yeah.
And so I take that very seriously. And we did have to act very intentionally to change some of our behaviors and try to make amends and apologize to our children for not being the attentive parents that they deserve during that time period. And that's really hard, really, really hard.
Yeah.
And we've told them, like, if we need to go sit down with you in therapy when you're 25 or 30 or 50 or whatever and deal with this shit, like, we'll be here for you.
Yeah.
You know, we've made some mistakes. To my defense a little bit, like when you're a public adjuster and you sign up all of these claims, you have this duty.
Yeah.
These people are living in hotels and they're living in tents, and I couldn't just pack up and leave. If I would have packed up and left, it wouldn't have helped any of them, and I probably would have gone bankrupt in the process. So I had put myself into a really tough situation.
Yeah.
And a lot of people probably would have just folded up.
So let's go into that real quick, because I think that's huge and something I had to self-reflect on when I was working for my family's businesses. I can remember my wife being pregnant with our first son, my only son, and then I got a daughter too, but our first pregnancy, and we're at the hospital, and she's having contractions, and I'm sitting here working on a bid, while she's over here, we're waiting for the doctors, getting everything ready. I'm like over here working on a bid, and man, I look back on that time and I was like, man, what a freaking jerk. Like, not present there with my wife, not present there to comfort her, and then same thing as my son was growing up, probably the first 2 years, I was so focused on work and pleasing other people that really shouldn't have been my priority, right? And no different than you were doing, right? Just in a different way. And I want to ask you, because it's ever since about 2020, January of 2020, for me, is when I changed my focus of my kids are my priority now. My wife's my priority. For me, my top priorities are God first, then my wife, then my kids, and then everything else falls in line. So, but I had to put measures in place, right? I had to put guardrails in place to be able to know that if I start going this way, then it's not going to be good. I'm going to neglect somebody. And then the same thing, how for you, having that many kids and having two amazing businesses, what guardrails did you put in place? Did you put some people in place? Did you put some SOPs in place to help put those guardrails up to where you didn't hurt your kids any further, or at least minimize that? Obviously, there's times we got to do what we got to do, right? But
for me, it's mostly been a process over the last year. My wife came across a book on boundaries.
Yeah.
And she shared the book with me on Audible, and it's a really great book. And I realized that I had never learned to set healthy boundaries. Like you, I wanted to please people, and I would often put those people ahead of my family. Mm-hmm. Maybe the way I was raised, I had some unhealthy ways of thinking, and so I'm still working to remedy some of that stuff. So I've done a couple of things. Paradise Claims entered into a big partnership with Premier Claims.
Okay.
And my strength is still in visionary stuff, big relationships, sales and marketing, social media, and our partnership allows me to just focus on those things. And I've got an amazing team of over 100 people at Premier that are there to help work all the claims and make sure that my clients are very well taken care of.
Right.
So that took a big load off of me, and that was a healthy thing. I've got a great integrator and EOS and SOPs at NTS, where it doesn't suck from my life like some people have allowed their companies to. And I'll never create a company that sucks the life out of me again. Yeah. I just still happen to own one that can, because I created it before I knew how to not.
Yeah.
And then I started instituting boundaries and learning how to communicate those boundaries with people. Yeah. And I'm still struggling for that balance, because let me tell you, 10 kids is expensive.
Yeah.
And I never feel like I'm ahead. I never feel like I'm where I want to be financially.
Right.
And so there's that balancing act, but I am being much more intentional about dividing my time and spending my time with the people that are important to me, which is my family.
Yeah. One thing I tell a lot of people when we go to events or we talk about different things, and I think you would probably agree with this, is, our kids, they don't care what we leave them. And I tell a lot of guys that will talk to me or women, they'll say, hey, I'm working 8 hours a week so I can do this for my family and my kids, At the end of the day, they don't care.
Yeah.
They want daddy or mommy home, and they want to be able to spend time with them. They don't care what you leave them one day, because whatever you leave them isn't going to replace you, right?
The
And
destination mindset can be a trap
yes,
because you're seeing it out there on the horizon, and before you know it, your kids are grown and
yeah,
they don't want a life with you because you
yeah,
haven't paid them any attention.
right,
And I've seen myself at risk of that, so I'm very blessed that I'm really close to my kids.
yeah,
I mean, I played pickleball with my 3 oldest boys this morning.
yeah,
Thank goodness. But if I wouldn't have really paid attention after 2020, I think that I could have lost that attention and that
yeah,
connection.
yeah. And I think that says a lot about you as a person, to be able to self-reflect and realize those things that, not only you're hurting yourself, you're hurting your family and the people that are most important around you. And again, you set that pride aside to be able to say, hey, I've got bigger priorities, and I've got to set these guardrails. I've got to set these boundaries. And one thing I want to touch on, when you said you had a partnership with Premier in Paradise, is, I'm sure there was some, maybe not equity, but some margins given up from having to do that, but you were able to probably step back and focus on what you're really good at, which then in turn, it may be taking a little bit of money away at first, but it's going to gain up in the end because you're able to focus on what you're really good at, right?
That's exactly right. You hit the nail on the head. And, at first, the numbers to me didn't look the way that I wanted them to look.
Right.
And Premier's a big company, they got a lot of overhead. But I turned away $75 million in commercial claims in 2021.
Wow.
I didn't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I was miserable because I was always managing the parts of the business that I didn't want to manage.
Right.
And so, number one, if I was able to live the life I want to live and do what I enjoy, I'd be okay with less money.
Yeah.
Number two, this business is so hectic that at the end of the day, I'm not always left with a lot of money anyways, even when you think you're making a lot of money.
Right.
When you're the one that's paying for all the screw-ups and the mess-ups and
Yeah.
the things that happen, sometimes there's not as much money as you hope at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But ultimately what I've found is that, I'm able to do more, a greater volume. I also, I get paid for claims and for managing big accounts,
Mm-hmm.
but I also get paid for recruiting.
Yeah.
Well, I'm good at recruiting. It's a great company. It's easy to recruit for.
Yeah.
Jackie and I have a big reach. We do that for other companies. So collectively, I can just be in my strengths,
Yep.
add value to their company. They've taken great care of us so far. And there's a good chance that on average I'm going to make the same amount of money or more in the long run with this partnership than I was on my own.
And less stress.
And a lot less stress.
A lot less stress.
A lot.
So, we've talked about your growing up through life, going through these different businesses, having a family, and everything like that. Tell us what's on the future, what's on the horizon, what's it looking like?
Well, we're done having kids.
Done having kids.
Done having kids.
Better not see it on Facebook here in a year or two.
If something went wrong, if that happens.
Right.
I went ahead and got fixed during the number 10.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I mean, I'm still a pretty young guy. I'm 38, and how many guys do you know that are 38 that are taking care of 10 kids?
Yeah, not a lot.
And we enjoy a fun, dynamic life, and we like dirt bikes, and we like travel, and we like boats, and it's just logistically, it's becoming outrageous.
Yeah,
It's crazy. So I'm just going to be invested in my kids and really kind of, I'm more interested in nurturing their careers now that, Asher, my oldest, is a licensed public adjuster now. He gets to work with me, and that's really cool. I want to help him grow his thing. And I would love to see NTS continue to grow. And honestly, I'm a serial entrepreneur, so there'll be something else around the corner, and I'm hoping it has to do with technology and AI, because I've been putting a lot of time and effort into learning about that lately.
Nice. Well, man, I appreciate you coming on today. I appreciate that when you came down to Waco, we got to connect, basically by a Facebook post, pretty much. How can people reach you? Where can they find you at?
Facebook's the best place. I'm
Yeah.
large loss expert on Instagram and TikTok. I've got 150,000 followers on TikTok. It's been a lot of fun. But Facebook's a great place. You can follow or friend me on there. I'm real responsive in my messages.
Yeah.
People can always text me, 214-299-2480. If you've got a question about insurance claims, roofing companies, recruiting, anything, I'm an open book. I'm glad to help.
Yep. Perfect, man. Well, like I said, I appreciate you coming on today to be able to share your life, share your story, share the different growth experiences in life, and hopefully some people will take something away from this. And just look forward to seeing more about your life, man, and seeing you through social media and the successes you have. So I really appreciate
Hope you
coming
enjoyed
on
the show today.
Awesome.
Listening
Thanks
to
a lot.
ordinary
Thank you.
people living
See you later,
extraordinary
guys.
lives. Want to hear more? Subscribe to our channel. And always remember, the first step is to get comfortable with getting uncomfortable. I'll see you on the flip side.